It's 5:25. We'll begin in another 5 minutes. All right. Hello, everybody. Good evening. It's 5:30 p.m. and well, I don't know if a sorry is enough, but nonetheless, the Zor Se Jatka meant that at 5:30 on screen, what I can see is close to 90 people in the house. That's really an interesting turnaround. But nonetheless, I would like to look at it in a rather constructive way rather than the traditional way of looking at it like the teacher took the cane and the kids are here. That's not the way I'd like to look at it. I'd rather be thankful to you for honoring my request yesterday, even though it was in anger. I'd like to thank you for honoring my request and being here exactly in and around 5:30, 31, 32, and close to 90. Somewhat is full house, which means because most of you are here on time rather than in time, we can get started exactly at 5:31, 32, rather than maybe slightly prolonging till 35, 40. So that's good for a start. Maybe just one more minute to have a few more in because there are a few who are trying to sneak in. So let me just get them in. Now we have 96. Oh my goodness. Yesterday, well, I don't want to go on justifying it or rationalizing it, but then, yeah, I did lose my cool. But today, quite contrastingly, I am really, really overwhelmed by. I don't know whether if it's because I'm going to teach the theater of absurd to you, or whether it's because I'm seeing almost all of you present on time. This is going to a full house. 99 now. Goodness me. Okay, so let's get started without further ado. Okay, no, doesn't matter. Okay, let's get started. And again, I'd like to begin by thanking you all for being here on time, honoring my invitation. And even though a sorry may or may not be adequate, apologies for what happened yesterday. Nonetheless, today we are in for a treat, though I'm not sure how far and where that's going to end up with. But nonetheless, today we are going to deal with the theater of the absurd and, in particular, Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. And when I say that, I have a strong hunch that waiting for Godot would somewhat be a waiting, and we would rather be discussing the theater of the absurd a bit more than waiting for Godot. I'll tell you why. Speaking about waiting for Godot, before, I mean, to be very specific, um, I was speaking to you yesterday about plays that you may pick and maybe that you may neglect when it comes to exams. I told you that Look Back in Anger is a play where all that you can do somewhat is write summary, apart from, say, a detailing of what the angry young man moment meant, or just in case they ask you what the kitchen sink realism is, to which I shall come back to tomorrow because we have quite a jam packed session today. So, tomorrow, apart from your annotations and essays, I'll come back to the kitchen sink drama explanation tomorrow. I left it midway yesterday, I know, but I'm also overwhelmed with the sort of mails that you sent me because as I tell you, because we are dealing in an online platform, and because it is inevitably necessary that you have your cam turned off, often I don't get a primary feedback. So even though I lecture or whatever I do, dramatizations I do, I'm not sure how far are you able to benefit from it. So the sort of feedback that I could somewhat get is the responses that you sent me in, either in chat box or through the mail. So when you mail me, like for example, sir, yesterday you defined this as dash and dash and dash, and I have a doubt regarding these two words, and you even send your a snapshot of your note. It's really a delightful sight that just makes me feel assured that my efforts are being honored, and that's something that really pleases anybody. And I do assure you that I'll get back to kitchen sink drama or its description tomorrow. As of today, we'll deal with the theater of the absurd, and under which falls Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett, an Irish playwright. And Waiting for Godot, as I told you yesterday, does not have a plot per se. As its subtitle goes on to say, nothing happens, nobody comes, nobody goes. It's a play full of inaction or inactivity. And if you try to go for a plot, yes, there are certain events happening, but they are all nonsensical, absurd. So, more often than not, especially in regular MA classes, while we discuss Waiting for Godot, what the students come back to us with questions is, why should we, after all, read this nonsensical play where nothing happens, nobody comes, nobody goes? Why are we to deal with a plotless plot, or a climaxless plot, or a coherenceless plot, or in a way, that's in fact in vernacular in Malayalam. When I ask students to come prepared with a summary of the play before we start discussing it, they would come up, and when I ask you what is the story of the play, they'd end up saying "Inda sambandhanu sare kada." Yeah, the English equivalent of asambandham is absurd, and that's exactly why the play is called as called to be falling under the category the theater of the absurd. And I would like to share with you today the various facets of absurd. And when I say various facets of absurd, the origin of the group theater of the absurd, who coined it, and what are the features of that. Yeah, I say features because for your assignment, the question is assess the play as an example of theater of the absurd. But at the same time, it also may be asked for your exams as well. So, how far or what are the attributes of a play that falls under the category theater of the absurd? So that's a discussion that we'll get to get started with, and maybe by 6:30, 6:35, 6:40, hopefully we'll discuss Godot. And when we do so, we try to figure out what would be beneficial for you from an examination perspective. And I'm not going too deep into the play Godot because you can go back to the reference materials or Cliff Notes or eNotes or Spark Notes, and that's in that sense easily comprehensible. All right, so let's get started with. We have 100. Oh my goodness, this is when I just saw this right now. We've got 100 people, a full house today, and it's really pleasing to see that we have a full house. That's really appealing. All right. So let's get started. And yeah, another benefit of having a full house is no one else can enter unless and until you go out due to some technical issues, which means I won't have this beep, 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 beep thing happening. So thank you for that as well. Let's get started with the theater of the absurd. The theater of the absurd emerged somewhat during the earlier half of 1950s and 1950s and the best thing or what led to the theater of the absurd's origin is that uh, the world was torn between two world wars, and in between that something called a great depression in the year 1929, a great economic depression. So amidst the two world wars and the great depression, where everything was at stake, the world witnessed so many murders and a lot of people dying, poverty, diseases, economic recessions, religious faith being challenged. So, amidst all those tumultuous circumstances, uh, a rather distinct mode of art came into fore. And this distinct mode of art was more or less evident in both theater as well as novels and also in other forms. Uh, like I told you, I think a few days ago, I don't know whether told this to you or not. In novel, there is this genre called stream of consciousness, popularized by people like Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, and so on. Stream of consciousness is a sort of novel wherein the mind of the character is revealed through the novel, or the thoughts of the character is revealed through the novel. You have novels written by these writers wherein, say, 200 plus pages go about, say, 2 minutes of thoughts of a character, and in 3 pages, say, 2 decades would pass by. So such an interesting blend was used by the what do you call stream of consciousness novelists, including Dorothy Richardson, Virginia Woolf, and James Joyce. If you come to Malayalam, I would say the best stream of consciousness novel exists in Malayalam, titled Manya by M.T. Vasudevan Nair. It's translated into English as The Mist. So it is about. It's also coincidentally about waiting, a school teacher named Vimala waiting for her love to come back to her. And that quest is what that novel is all about. So when you discuss a phenomenon like expressionism that originated in, say, the early half of 20th century, especially in American theater under Eugene O'Neill, uh, I point this out to a lot of my learners. What is expressionism? Expressionism is about dance, music, a lot of indigenous apparatus being used. Then there is this mind of the character revealed, it is psychological in nature. So I tell them expressionism is to theater what stream of consciousness is to novel. For example, if you look at O'Neill's masterpiece, Emperor John's, there are 7 scenes. The first and last scene happen in reality, and the remaining middle 5 scenes are actually manifestations of the protagonist's mind. So how would you interpret, for example, a play like Emperor John? So it is psychological realism. So expressionism is to drama what stream of consciousness does to novel. That's something I observed. And if you go back and read your MEG 3 books, I think like Portrait of Artist as a Young Man, you would agree to this. Yes, there is no music though. But then, yeah, you would find this design or this connection between expressionism as well as stream of consciousness. So speaking about the 20th century theater, before explaining the theater of the absurd, I should also briefly discuss the 20th century theater. Maybe I'd elaborate on that sometimes later. But then, like I told you, during Shakespeare, there were 5 acts. Then it was 4, 3 by Oscar Wilde. Yesterday, when we learned Osborne, again, we have 3 acts. But by the time we have this 20th century getting started, there emerged a new form of drama, especially in America. And because you are learning British theater, you're not getting exposed to that part. But maybe if you had done your UG in under MG University, you would have been familiar with this art form in a book titled "Reading Literatures in English," a Common Course textbook. This art form had its origins in America. It was started and perfected to a certain extent by American playwrights, especially Eugene O'Neill. Tennessee Williams, for instance, was a master in that. And he had his own reasons. This genre that originated in America, in my observation, I may be wrong, you can correct me later, but then this genre that I believe originated in America is popularly called nowadays as the one act plays. There is only one act. There might be several scenes, just like in Emperor John's, there are 7 scenes. But then, unlike the 5 act plays, there'll be shorter versions of a play, and they'll be composed. They'll be small. There'll be more focus on the plot, and such plays are called one act plays, of which Tennessee Williams, in particular, was a champion. And in Britain, there were people like W. Jacobs, who wrote a popular one act play like Monkey's Paw. Just in case you don't want to sleep tonight, this is one play you can go back to. And I really pray nobody knocks at your door after you have finished reading that play. It's likely a horror kind of a play, a gothic play. Nonetheless, Monkey's Play by W. Jacobs is a play that you may go back to and read if you feel like. One of the best one act plays that I've seen. Similarly, Tennessee Williams. Tennessee Williams has written a wide range of one act plays. You may go Google, and Wikipedia would tell you an entire list of one act plays by Tennessee Williams if you Google one act plays by Tennessee Williams. And more than one act plays is 2 act play titled, what was the name? Portrait of a Girl on a Glass, translated into Glass Menagerie. So the Glass Menagerie is a 2 act play by Tennessee Williams, and that's considered to be one of his masterpieces. It's a 2 act play, not a one act play, but then he has also written a lot of one act plays. And what was the name of the collection? I'm looking for that. Tennessee Williams Wagon Full of Cotton. 27 Wagons Full of Cotton. That's the name of the collection of his one act plays. 27 Wagons Full of Cotton. That's a titular play. You also have plenty of other interesting one act plays in that collection, including Madonna. And there is this play where D.H. Lawrence makes a guest appearance. I forgot the name of that. Okay. So, what led to the emergence of one act plays? That's another thing that we need to. I'm not going to read this in detail. I'll quickly wind this up. So, what led to the emergence of one act plays is also something that we need to be aware of. Remember, by then, another popular medium emerged into full called cinema. And it tried to overcome a few problems that theater had. For example, in cinema, you could have a moving scene. You could have the close-up of somebody. You could have, say, a part of a character shown. And there was music, and at a later point, there were dialogues. So people started flowing towards movie watching instead of theater, because theater was long and it was boring comparatively. So the 20th century American playwrights came up with this radical form of one act plays. It's like the evolution of cricket. Cricket started as a 5-day or a 4-day test cricket mode. Later, owing to popular demand, there was this 50 over ODIs, 1-day internationals being played. And off late, we have 2020s. And if that was not enough, in Abu Dhabi and all, there is this 10-10 leagues. So because people don't have time to, and because shorter formats can be more attractive, Americans invented this one-act play genre, and it was popularized. And one-act plays, in order to lure the audience, they brought in a lot of cinematic devices to the play. For instance, themes like music, lighting, and stage movement, etc. So the theater world that you are familiar with as a three-floor or a three-wall structure slowly started to change. Of course, it took the absurdists to entirely change the theater world, but then this was the beginning, and this was good for a beginning, to be precise. And there are plenty of attributes that I can go on elaborating about the one act plays, particularly about the glass menagerie. Another attraction that these playwrights had while writing one act plays is later they could be, if that becomes popular and successful, it could be converted into a screenplay and adapted into a Hollywood movie. Most of Tennessee Williams' plays later became movies. It was scripted by himself, so he gained a lot of money by doing so. So he followed the structure of one genre to another genre transition. Short story, then one act play, then it becomes a screenplay, it becomes a movie. So this is what led to the popularity and, in a way, I would say, revival of drama. So drama traveled in an entirely different path in terms of stage settings and props. So that's something that you may notice when you go to one act plays. Fortunately or unfortunately, you don't have to study one act plays in this paper. So I won't like to take any further time for that. I'm quickly moving on to the theater of the absurd. So what exactly is the theater of the absurd? The term theater of the absurd was initially used by a critic named Martin Esslin. You may Google that later, and you may even look at the summary of that book. Martin Esslin wrote a book with the title The Theater of the Absurd in the year 1962, claiming that there are a group of playwrights like Samuel Beckett and Eugene Ionesco and Harold Pinter and so on and on and on, who show a sort of absurdist tendencies in their writings. So this became the foundation of the theater of the, this became the foundation argument towards the concept of absurdity in theater. But just like we speak about a lot of authors denying the critics, most of the playwrights, including Beckett, denied Martin Esslin's charges. They refused to be called as absurdist dramatists. But nonetheless, we can identify certain features that is present in their plays. So before talking about the plays, I would like to speak a little bit about fiction, that is novels. And those novelists also refuse to be called with a tag. And those group of people are called existentialist writers. Existentialism, to be more specific about the ism, existentialism or existential novelists came into fore after 1950s or 1940s, late 1940s, after the Second World War ended. The people across the globe experienced a sort of an existential angst. And this could be seen best in the novels of people like Franz Kafka, people like Jean-Paul Sartre, people like Albert Camus. These people came up with novels which were absolutely existential in nature. For example, for a novel like, what was the name of that novel? Franz Kafka wrote a novel called The Trial. In a novel like The Trial, a gentleman, a young man, no, before Metamorphosis, there is this novel called Trial. So in The Trial, there is a youngster who wakes up on the day of his birthday. And as he wakes up, on the two sides of his bed, there are two executors. They ask him to accompany them. And they take him and they execute him on his birthday. ഏതാ പിറന്നാൾ ദിവസം ഉറങ്ങി എണീക്കുന്ന ഒരു ചെറുപ്പക്കാരനെ വാ കഴുമരത്തിലേക്ക് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു വിളിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് പോകുന്നു. അവനൊന്നും ചോദിക്കില്ല. He does not ask anything. And he is executed. So state machinery being treated as absurd. In another play, I think in another novel by Albert Camus called Stranger, That novel has two names because it's a French translation. The novel is titled The Stranger, and in certain editions, it's titled The Outsider. So, in that novel, the protagonist, when the novel begins, he begins by a rather controversial, bizarre statement. He says, Mama died. Mama means mother. Mother died yesterday or today, I do not remember. Strange, isn't it? He says, my mother died, but was it yesterday or today? I don't remember, but I'm on my way to cremate her. And as the play progresses, we see the character getting involved in absurd activities. And he even murders somebody without any cause. Okay. And these writers and their works in particular contained so many characters who had this existential crisis. In a way, the Hamletian to be or not to be. We are all born and we are choiceless. We don't have a choice. And because we are born and because we'll die, we are living a life which is a suffering. We don't know the purpose of life. In a post-war NUI, I taught you that word yesterday, ENNUI. So in a post-war NUI, in a post-war conundrum, they are confused souls with the faith in religion retreating, a lot of deaths, economical instabilities, poverty, diseases. They believe that life is suffering. They believe that life is meaningless. And in this spirit comes the basics of the theater of the absurd. And one link that I shared with you in my initial classes was that of Crash Course Theater. And if you go through Crash Course Theater, you would notice one thing, that they are not dealing purely with British drama, but rather universal theater. So they talk to you about Russian theater, Indian theater, Sanskrit theater, French theater, Chinese, Japanese theater, blah, blah, blah. So every time you study British theater, especially whenever you come across a phenomena, you must realize that there could be an equivalent or somewhat similar thing at the other side as well. So that possibility is what leads us to begin our discussions on the theater of the absurd. The theater of the absurd originated not with Samuel Beckett. I see a lot of people writing assignments and say Samuel Beckett is the father of theater of the absurd. No. First of all, he does not claim that he's an absurdist. But nonetheless, he is not attributed with the beginnings. The theater of the absurd originated in France. Or I could even tell you another story, but nonetheless, Martin Estlin claims that we could trace its origins in France. And in every nation, we can come across a few playwrights who heralded this movement. Whether they agreed or not, they wrote plays which were absurd in nature. For example, a person like Jean Genet in France. I'm just typing those names for you so that if you want, you can go back and refer to these people. Jean Genet in France, Arthur Adamov in Russia. You have someone like Fernando Arrabal from Spanish Morocco. Then you have Samuel Beckett from Ireland. Then again, you have Eugene Ionescu from Romania. Well, whether you put it in Romania or from Romania, or whichever way you see that, that's totally fine. But nonetheless, these were a few exponents of the theater of the absurd. And the way they place bought a sort of a revelation is something that's really enthralling. So, what exactly is absurd? The dictionary meaning would say that absurd is something that is against reason or common sense, illogical, clearly false or foolish, Funny because clearly unsuitable or impossible. I'd like to repeat that definition once again because this is central to any discussions on absurd or absurdity. Against reason or common sense, semicolon, clearly false or foolish, again semicolon, funny because clearly unsuitable or impossible. One more time. Against reason or common sense, that is purely illogical, clearly false or foolish, funny because clearly unsuitable or impossible. So Martin Esslin, in the introduction to his book The Theatre of the Absurd, adds some other adjectives like out of harmony with reason or propriety, incongruous, illogical, and so on. And he goes on to define it as follows. And this is a wonderful, interesting paragraph that I'd like to share with you. In common usage, absurd may simply mean ridiculous. But this is not the sense in which Camus used the word and in which it is used when we speak of the theatre of the absurd. In an essay on Kafka, Ionesco defined his understanding of the term as follows. Absurd is that which is, absurd is that which purpose, cut off from his religious, metaphysical, is devoid of, and transcendental roots, man is lost. All his actions become senseless, absurd, useless. I repeat, absurd is that which purpose, cut off from his religious, metaphysical, is devoid of, and transcendental roots, man is lost. All his actions become senseless, absurd, useless. If not for a full house today, in all the class when I read this definition, I have written it there. I generally tell my students that teaching is one such absurd activity. There are times when, after addressing certain batches, we would feel that all the actions of ours are senseless, absurd, and useless both ways. There are a group of people who believe that what the hell is this idiot speaking? And vice versa as well. We would feel like, what are these people gathering from my sessions? But nonetheless, before proceeding further with further definitions on the theatre of the absurd, I'd like to give you some attributes of the theatre of the absurd. This is quite central, not only to our discussion today, but also for your exams or for your future life. If at all you go back to beyond the textbook line and you read Jean Genet or Arthur Adamo or Ferrando Arrabal or say Eugene Ionesco or more plays of Samuel Beckett, which are called or labeled as the absurd, you can look for these features and have a scientific analysis of whether those plays are really absurd or not. So speaking about the theatre of the absurd, it is at first characterized by a deliberate refusal of realism. So point number one, refusal of realism. We've heard this realism crap quite a lot of late. Yeah, depicting what is as it is. So that makes sense, right? At this point of time, if you write the story of someone who is jobless because of the COVID pandemic and lockdown, that's realistic. It makes sense to you. When you, even if say 10 years after you read that book, it makes complete sense to you that that guy lost his job and maybe he committed suicide because of that. But then the theatre of the absurd has an absolute rejection of what may be called as realism. Although there are moments which carry the traces of the realistic works, realism is never the basic principle when it comes to the absurdist plays. The main principle is to search, on the contrary, in a fundamental unreality which manifests itself as much in the framework as in the intrigue or the characters who oscillate between lack of feeling and nullity and the improbability of the most fantastic sort. I know it's a bit complicated. So again, I'd like to read that for you. The main principle is to search, on the contrary, in a fundamental unreality which manifests itself as much in the framework as in the intrigue or the characters who oscillate between lack of feeling and nullity and the improbability of the most fantastic sort. The main interest of the playwright is neither to reveal a society and its problems, nor a psychological study, and their refinement is none of their concern either. So, see, unlike a realist writer, an absurdist does not look for, say, to reveal a society and its problems, which is in fact realism, or a psychological study, or a redemption, as in the refinement of the character. These are not at all the interest of a absurdist playwright. To create a spectacle, they usually tend to constitute an effect of totality, which reveals its obsessional interior world through gests, songs, lights, and colors. I know this might be a bit vague for you now, but maybe in another 40 minutes you would understand what this means. To create a spectacle, they usually tend to constitute an effect of totality, which reveals its obsessional interior world. By that I mean the stage properties, which we call as props, PROPS, and settings. So, the interior world through gests, songs, lights, and colors. Thus, it has some. Yeah, okay. So that's the basic that you need to know about it. I've spoken about the various people involved, and yeah, the theater of the absurd, while trying to express its sense of the senselessness of the human condition and the inadequacy of the rational approach by the open abandonment of rational devices and discursive thought. Again, I'm requoting Martin Esslin. Never argues about the subject, but it merely presents it in being, that is, in terms of concrete stage images. I'd like to repeat that statement once again. While trying to express its sense of the senselessness, as I told you, the futility of our living, as the meaninglessness of the life. So, in an attempt to depict the sense of the senselessness of the human condition and the inadequacy of the rational approach, that is, realistic approach, by the open abandonment of rational devices and discursive thoughts, that is, anything that's commonsensical, anything that is logical, that is being dismissed, the theater of the absurd or absurdist playwrights never argue about the subject, but it merely presents it in being, B-E-I-N-G. It never argues about the subject. There might be a character who has memory problems. They do not prod deep into the problems, what led to the memory problems. They present the character as it is. And that forgetting can sometimes be a replica of the society's habit. Probable. It could be symbolic in that sense. So, yeah, presents it in being, that is, in terms of concrete stage images. The radical but poetic language of it also emerges from these images. But what happens on the stage transcends and often contradicts the words spoken by the characters. That's a major thing. It often transcends the stage and often contradicts the words spoken by the characters. You can see this coming into effect absolutely in Waiting for Godot. When you read Godot, you can see that this is exactly what happens in Godot. It finds its most various forms when you go through these plays. You would come that it takes various shapes with various playwrights. The way Ionesco handles absurdism is different from the way Beckett handles it. The way, for example, Adamo handles is different from Jean Genet. So these transformations should also be noted as you go through these plays at one point or the other. All right. Let's quickly move on to a few more discussions on what do you call the absurdist plays. And this is significant because this will give you an intimate overview to the theater of the absurd. So, in order to make you realize what the theater of the absurd is, I'd like to talk to you a few stories from the theater of the absurd. And for that, I'm conveniently keeping Samuel Beckett apart. I will be discussing to you over the say next 20 to 25 minutes only about one single playwright, and his name is Eugene Ionescu. He is a Romanian playwright, and his works are available in translation in English. You go Google it, you'll see the plays recorded in YouTube. You would also come across certain of his works in b-ok.org. I'll be discussing plays with you in, say, another 30 seconds. And in order to do that, as usual, I'll be logging in from my mobile. Just give me a second. We'll resume in, say, 30 seconds. All right, hello. I hope I'm audible to you.
Yes,
Hello.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Hello. 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 Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So, let me quickly move on to a description of beginnings of the theatre of the absurd, and in doing so, I'd like to share a fairy tale, hearsay tale with you. And when I say a fairy tale, hearsay tale, this tale may be fictitious. This tale may not be true. This tale may just be a creation of some nutty professor who just wanted to let us know what theatre of the absurd is. The saying goes like this. Again, I told you Martin Esslin says that it originated in France. But the saying goes like this. In Ireland, in Dublin to be more precise, one fine day, there, were, there was a play being staged. And the play was an amateur play by some theatre student. And there were not too many audiences. It was not a full house or anything. There were a few people who had come to watch the play. And the plot of the play is very simple. What happens in the play is when the play opens, a character commits murder. I don't remember if it was by knife or if it was by gun, but somehow the protagonist commits a murder. The protagonist murders somebody, and he's caught by the police. And as is the norm in any state, the convict is taken to the court and the trial takes place. So from there on, the entire play is a lengthy discussion on the case. There are what do you call? There are advocates who. Hello, am I not audible? Hello,
Yes, sir, you're
hello.
audible.
Somebody can hear you. Am I not audible?
Yes, you can hear.
Yes, sir.
Audible, sir.
You, you are audible, sir.
I think there is some connectivity issues with my Bluetooth. Let me just check.
But sound quality is little bit poor.
Okay. What now? Hello. Is it the same?
It's okay, sir.
Okay, just give me one more second. I'll be back. Just a second. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I hope I'm audible now.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes,
Yes,
sir. Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
We can carry on.
Quite clear, sir.
Okay, thank you. Let me know just in case the voice drops at any point of time. I hope it's fine now. So I was trying to tell you that this is a fictitious story regarding the origins of theatre of the absurd. Once upon a time, in Dublin, that is in Ireland, there was a play being staged, and it was an amateurish play by a theatre student. And the house was not full or anything. So in an auditorium, a play was being staged to a mixed audience. And when the play begins, the protagonist commits a murder. He murders somebody. I don't remember whether it was with knife or gun, but nonetheless, he kills somebody. And he is caught by the police. And the procedures are followed, and he's taken to the court. And the entire play, which is about, say, 2.5 hours, is about the convict being taken to the court and then the court proceedings. The advocates arguing for and against the person being executed. So, after quite a lot of discussion, the judge is about to pronounce the judgment, which is probably the climax of the play. The judge is about to say, because the prosecution has failed to prove with sufficient evidences that the party has committed a crime, he is acquitted. So the judge is about to say this. The judge says that the evidences are not strong, the prosecution has not succeeded in being convincing, and he's about to say that uh, the culprit is going to be acquitted. So you imagine yourselves in the foot of the audience. You are watching this play, so you know that it is an amateur aspirant playwright who's come up with the play. So right from the beginning, you're watching this play, and because it's a drag, 1.5 hours of court proceedings, you feel bored. Maybe you don't walk out because he's your friend, probably the playwright or the actor or someone is your friend, or you have some other motive, so you have to kill time. So you have to bear with this. So you don't walk out of that auditorium. You are there in that auditorium. And what happens when you watch a boring movie or a boring play? There is someone sitting next to you. You'll be talking to that person and saying, "Are yaar, kya bakwas hai? What a boring movie or what a boring play." So you had such banters with the people sitting next to you. You chit chat, maybe you yawn a lot, and you watch this play. So towards the fag end of the play, the judge is about to say, "The prosecution has failed, and I'm going to acquit the convict." And then all of a sudden, to everybody's surprise, the person who is sitting next to you stands up and says, "Your Honor, I have something to say. I witnessed the murder." Surprise. So he puts his hands up and says, "I have something to say. I saw this guy committing a murder. You cannot acquit him." So then the judge says, "A court is a court. If you have to say something and it has to be valid, you have to come up. Only if you give a statement in court, it becomes valid. So if you want to say something, come up and perform." So you are startled because you just told him what a bakwas play this is. And that guy is standing up and he has transformed himself to be a central character in the play. He walks up stage, he goes to the dais, says, I'll speak truth and only truth and nothing without truth. And he gives a testimony of, to be specific, he gives the eyewitness that he witnessed the murder being committed by the culprit. And as an anticlimax or the climax, whatever you call it, to the play, The judge proclaims that the culprit be hanged to death, and thus the play comes to an end. I've heard various versions of the story, often associated with Samuel Beckett. There are also other playwrights who are credited with this plot. I'm not sure whether this is fictitious or true, but this would give you an essence of what absurd is. Until then, perhaps, we wouldn't think about an audience getting into stage and becoming a decisive part of what happens in the play. So, absurd is not only about ideology, but also about the stage setting. Even the dynamics of the stage between three walls and an invisible curtain. The dynamics also started to transform. The thin line between the podium or the dais or the stage and the audience started to vanish. Now, very quickly, because we are up to 6:20 now, very quickly, I'd like to discuss 3 to 4 plays with you. Later, you can go back and Google these plays. Again, as I told you, these plays are or were written by the Romanian playwright Eugene Ionescu. The plays are titled The Lesson, Lesson. Then the plays are titled The Lesson, Amedi, Amedi. Another play, I got to refer that because that's such a long title. Um, yeah, another play is titled The Future is in Eggs, or It Takes All Sorts to Make a World. I repeat, the future is in eggs, or it takes all sort to make a world. Apart from this, I'd also be discussing in detail the chairs as well as rhinoceros. I repeat, the lesson, Amidi, all the world is in eggs and blah blah blah. The chairs, Chairs, and also rhinoceros. So these are the plays I'll be discussing very briefly with you. So what happens in the lesson is that there's a teacher, a retired teacher, probably say in his late 50s or early 60s, who's waiting in a hotel room. He's waiting for his student to come so that he can take tuitions for her. The teacher waits, the student comes. She is barely, say, 14, 15, 16 years old, kind of resembling Ophelia because she is careless. She's not that interested to learn. Maybe she's come because her parents forced her to go for tuitions. Maybe she wants to pass. So the student comes, the teacher starts teaching her very passionately. But then she does not pay heed to him at all. She is distracted, she yawns, she has her own childishness. And at the heat of the moment, you know what the teacher does? Any guesses? The teacher tries to teach passionately, and the child is not listening. He gets furious, he gets angry. What does he do? Are you guys here? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Yes, please,
Maybe,
Nirupama.
maybe beating.
That's the least that we do in reality, right? But then, Shavati Gutale Kartike. Yeah, maybe that's the least that a teacher could do. But then even Kane is banned of late. But then because it's fiction and because it's absurd, don't look for realities. But then what the teacher does is, in the heat of a moment, because he gets angry, he's passionately trying to teach and the student is not paying heed, he murders her. He kills her. And when he looks back, he sees that the maid is cleaning the floor. There is an eyewitness. But then the maid helps him bury the corpse of the child or to hide the corpse of the child under the carpet. And the play ends with the teacher waiting for the next student to come. I'm sure already the horror BGM would be running in your minds. Let me move on to the Amedi. MEG is a play which reveals to us the life of a couple, a married husband and wife. It's been quite a few years since they've been married. They are in a they are married, they are couples, and they are living together. And as the play opens, we realize that their marriage is in a soup. By that I mean their marriage is in a disturbed pattern. Even though they are a couple, even though they are a couple, they are not in terms. So something is disturbing them. Throughout the play, we see that the husband is sitting in the hall. He's trying to write something. And the wife, most of the times, tries to go to the bedroom in the guise of cleaning the room, say sweeping or cleaning the room. And the husband taunts her by saying that, I know why you are going to that room. You still miss him, don't you? You want to have a glimpse of him. That's why you go to that room every time. You know, നിന്റെ ജാരനെ കാണാൻ വേണ്ടി ഒരു നോക്ക് കാണാൻ വേണ്ടി നീ ആ മുറിയിലേക്ക് പോണതല്ലേടി ചോദിക്കാൻ. And we are slowly revealed that in the bedroom, under the bed, or under the cot to be precise, there is a dead body. And this dead body is of none else than his wife's lover. So maybe one fine day, this guy found out that his wife was having a physical relationship, illicit relationship with someone. On the heat of the moment, he killed him and he has kept him under the cot. So we are told that the protagonist, that is the husband, is a writer, an aspirational writer, an aspiring writer. And over the last decade or so, he has written only 2 lines. Only 2 lines. Roughly translated, it says, is it still growing? And I forgot what the second line is, but nonetheless, only 2 lines. And this it referred to is that of the guy who was killed. And as the play moves, then the wife replies to the taunt of her husband that she was not looking at, or was not romancing the one who is dead, but rather she was trying to clean the room, and she feels that the corpse is growing day by day. She comments that, has it really grown inch by inch? So what happens is, if it keeps growing like this, it will be larger than our house. So they also do not let visitors into their house because they have a dead body in the house. So the wife says that it's high time they got rid of that corpse. Even though literally we can imagine a corpse under the cot and the husband and wife talking about that, it is more of a metaphorical presence of the other in their life. Because there was an illicit relationship, the current marital relationship is in discord. And they cannot, proceed with that. Probably. That's a metaphorical interpretation. But nonetheless, the husband agrees to what she says. And he tries to put this corpse into a bag. Of course, there is no logic, okay? 10 years, 15 years later, would the corpse still be not stinking or not bleeding? That logic is being set apart because it's absurd. But the husband puts the corpse in the sack. And what he does is, he carries the sack away. As he walks out, it is during the World War period. So as he tries to walk away, he sees that there is a soldier who is walking near him. The husband is terrified. He believes that he'll be caught red-handed and he will be arrested immediately. But to his surprise, the soldier offers our character help to bury the corpse. And as the protagonist and the soldier try to bury the corpse, police come to catch hold of this guy. And to everybody's amusement, the protagonist all of a sudden races in the air along with the dead body and vanishes into thin air. That's the climax of the story. I can again, for the effect, transform it in both the languages that you are comfortable with. നാടകം അവസാനിക്കുമ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ നായകൻ ശവത്തിന്റെ ഒപ്പം വായുവിൽ ഉയർന്നു പൊങ്ങി അപ്രത്യക്ഷനാവുകയാണ്. जब ये प्ले खत्म होता है तो हमारा मेन कैरेक्टर हवा में उड़ के गायब हो जाता है. And you may say, how absurd, how strange. And that's exactly what we call absurdity. And that's not over yet. I had referred to you a small, not a small, but a very, very large title. A very large title in such a way that I have to always refer to that title to be politically correct. The future is in X, or it takes all sorts to make a world. It's available in BOK. You can go back and download this. The future is in X, and it takes all sorts to make a world. So what happens in that play? What happens in that play? In that play, we have a scenario where we have a character called Jacques. We have his mother. Both mother and father have the same name, Jacques. And you have his wife, the wife of Jacques, called Jacqueline. And they have a grandmother and grandfather too. So what happens is, as the play opens, Jacqueline, who is the wife of Jack, is trying to deliver a baby. But she's struggling to deliver a baby. Or maybe I think they're trying to make a baby. I don't remember exactly. But nonetheless, the photograph of the grandpa is hanged in the background with a mala, which means that he's dead. But as this process goes on, as the struggle to make a baby is going on, the grandpa enters and he dances and he sings. And grandmother says, "Oh, you were a headache for me when you were alive. Now that you are dead, please stop doing the same to me. Don't piss me off." Again, I'm sure you'd agree with me that this is absurd. Somebody who's dead joins the living and goes on singing and dancing, emerging from the photograph. Now, let me quickly, very quickly, move on to the two plays, The Chairs and Rhinoceros. And for the queries in the chat box, I'll share the attendance link. It's just that maybe we are slightly following the format of Indian Railway today. Always late. So today we are slightly derailed. We are maybe derailed by 5 or 7 minutes. I'll share the attendance sheet by, say, 6:38, 6:40. I'll try to rush through these stories. So what happens in The Chairs? The Chairs is one of my favorite plays by UNESCO. As the play opens, again we have a couple. This time, a fisherman folk. There is a meenkaran and a meenkari, a machliwala and a machliwali. They are old, elderly couple. And as the play begins, they declare to their community, the people around them, that they would like to host a tea party for them that evening. And they tell that they have discovered a worldly secret which nobody knows. Nobody knows the secret. And we have discovered the secret. And because we are aware of that worldly secret now, we'd like to share it with you. So come join us for tea in the evening. And this builds up. Mind you, there are only two characters on stage. Nobody else is there. These two characters, this couple, build up by their dialogues. And they go on to say that, okay, it's evening, it's getting evening, the guests will arrive now, okay, they are coming. And there is this sort of mono act, sort of an enactment. They assume crowd. and with my, the limitations of the online modus, the problem is that I can't act. What they do is, oh, please, don't, rush. Go slowly. Everybody will be served tea. And he says, Martha, please bring tea for Mr. Fernandez. Oh, Mrs. Fernandez, you haven't got your diabetic tea. Please don't put sugar for her. And they go on improvising the stage. And when you look at that, you would feel slightly surprised because only two people are on the stage. But the way they act, you'd feel that the stage is full. There are chairs, empty chairs, but you'd feel that those chairs are full. And they would go on enacting, and they would be saying, everybody are impatient, technically. They want to know what the truth is. And they go on to reassure them that please be patient, I'll tell you the truth in a moment. We are waiting for a few more people to come. Let them come. For example, Jamila from the neighborhood hasn't come, or Fernandez hasn't come yet. Let them also join. Please have your tea. Please enjoy your tea and the biscuits. Martha, please bring her more biscuits. And it goes on like that. And this goes on for, say, 45, 50 minutes. And by now you would have understood that those chairs, those neighborhood people who would have come to know the secret are actually the audience. That's you. For example, when I'm telling you the story right now, you are the people who want to know what these two people have to say, because for 15 minutes, if they are engaging you like this, there must be something that they want to convey to you. So you're all eagerly and impatiently waiting for them to reveal that. And after, say, 40, 45, 50 minutes of build-up, they tell you that because we are old and too weak to reveal this truth, we have entrusted this duty with our advocate. So please be patient. He's on his way. He'll join us very shortly. And the moment he joins, we'll let you know what's going to happen, what's the truth. And they bid farewell. They say, we bid you adieu. We are leaving. Our advocate would come and he'll tell you what that divine truth is. So metaphorically, they exit, and when they exit, that exit literally says that they are going to commit suicide. They both go and get drowned in the sea. But we, the audience, are eagerly waiting for the advocate. And then, before they leave, they say, okay, here comes our advocate. Now we leave it to him and we take goodbye. Bye, everybody. Thanks for your patient listening. We are taking leave. He'll tell you the truth. And they leave. They leave means they are going to die. And the advocate comes. And for Malayalis, I think this would be a better example. Once, 5-6 years ago, this play was enacted in the town hall, municipal town hall in Ernakulam North. And the role of the advocate was played by Sunil Sugada. I'm sure you're all familiar with Sunil Sugada, the guy who played the Kapyar in Amin, or the one who played the insurance agent in Big B, etc., etc. So he played the role of this Vakil. So as you know, the advocate has this coat, black and white coat and pant, and he has a hat, and this guy has some white hair in his ears, and this guy comes in, he's got some document with him, he's got a heavy bag, he holds all that, he walks from the audience, in the middle of the audience, he comes to the stage, he stands at the podium, he stands at the center, and again he takes, say, 5 to 6 minutes opening the bag, taking the document, preparing himself. He does not speak for 5 to 6 minutes. By then, I'm sure as audience, you would all be really, really desperate. You would feel pissed off that this guy is not talking. You're so eagerly waiting for him to speak and say something. And this guy opens the file, turns it upside down, and steadies himself. And finally, say 6-7 minutes later, he looks at you. And needless to say, you're all looking at him. You're waiting for the truth that he's going to reveal. And then for a minute or two, he looks at you, but he doesn't talk. So an obvious response is somebody from the audience would end up saying, "Onnu paranju tolekada." Yeah? Say something. We have to go. We have to leave. And the character on stage says, blah, blah, blah. I can neither hear or talk. I'm dumb and deaf. and with that, curtains. And I'm sure the moment I said that, you would have said, what absurdity this is. And that's exactly why we call it an absurdist play. And at the height of absurdism, we have the play called Rhinoceros. In fact, it is a metaphorical take on capitalism, or the sort of modern lives that we all live in. In a saffronized India, it can also be seen as a political play in the modern context, or a critique on journalism, or what we may these days call as post-truth. It's one of my favorite plays, Rhinoceros. What happens in Rhinoceros? Again, by now I'm sure you would have left your common senses apart. So listen to the story without commonsensical premonitions. It's a wonderful story. What happens in Rhinoceros? When the play opens, the two characters, especially the protagonist and his friend, the name of the protagonist is Berenger, Berenger. So Berenger and his friend are seated in a cafe. They are sipping over their coffee in a busy street, mind you. For Malayalis, the example I can say is Ernakulam's MG Road. Yeah, a busy street like MG Road, there is a cafe, and these people are sitting and sipping over their coffee. And Berenger is seated with his back to the entrance, and his friend is looking to the entrance. So as they sip the coffee, mind you, a busy street in a city center, the people who are sitting with them make exclamatory noises. Like, ah, wow, oh, they make these noises. And Berenger looks back. And he also says, oh my God. What happened? In a busy street like MG Road, say for example, a tiger crosses the road like that. In the play, when the play opens, they are having their coffee. In a busy street, a rhinoceros crosses the road. And people are in exclamation, oh wow, rhino, look at that, rhino, see, Mone, Kuti, see, rhino. And they are all in exclamation. And when we look back at that scene after the end of the play, the problem begins there. Everybody are in exclamation, but nobody thinks logically. Nobody asks, what does this wild animal has to do in a busy city road? You never expect a tiger in a metropolitan road. So the presence of rhinoceros in the city is in that sense a not logical thing. That does not happen generally. But nobody thinks in that way. They're all in admiration. Oh, a rhino. See, a rhino. We've only seen that in zoos and movies or in news channel. So a rhino. And this is the first appearance. In the first appearance, rhino does nothing. Rhino simply comes, it walks the road, and it goes away. And then it makes subsequent appearances in the city. And the second time it comes, it stamps a lady's cat. The third time it comes, we can see that the aggression grows. It kills the cat. So with subsequent appearances, the rhinos are no longer alone and they are no longer harmless. And there is this manager. Berenger works in a bank. So in the bank that Berenger works in, there is this manager who is representational of the modern day media houses. So initially when the rhino appears, they dismiss the statement by saying, a rhino in a city? Absurd. Somebody must be bluffing, cooking a story. As further appearances happen, as they grow aggressive, they end up saying that this rhino has to be feared. Rhinos are not supposed to be let enter the human world. And as the play progresses, the tone keeps changing. So earlier, rhino, rubbish, somebody is bluffing. Then the tone changes and says, if it is true, we should be scared. Rhinos should not be walking in a street, it should be in the forest. Then it's like rhinos would be trekked to the human world. And as rhinos makes further appearances, the tone neutralizes. What's wrong with the rhino? Let them walk. They are also human beings. Corona is a human being. Why can't Corona live? Doesn't have human rights. So let the rhino walk. What's wrong with it? And as the play moves on, we see that day by day, people contract with a disease called rhinocerositis. That is, anybody who come in touch with rhino become rhinos. So day by day, the city is in shock that people are becoming rhinos. So in Beranger's bank, there is a lady. One fine morning, she comes and she starts crying that her husband is missing. She says, I want to see him right now. And everybody tries to console her, saying, don't worry, he'll come to you. And then all of a sudden, a tremor is heard, like an earthquake. The building is shaking. So everybody go out and see what's happening. Then below, downstairs, there is this husband who's come in a scooter. And this husband has turned a rhino, mind you. And with his horns, he's hitting at the building. And the moment the lady sees her husband, even though he's a rhino, she jumps from the top floor to the scooter and they ride away. Both the husband and the wife, they ride away to the shock of the colleagues. Now this is becoming commonplace. Now people say that there's a rhinocerositis inspiration everywhere. They are like, what's wrong with the rhinoceros? Rhinos are the trend of the day. India needs rhino. Ab ki baar, rhino sarkar. So there are people who are getting converted into rhinos. So people are getting transformed. So one fine day, Beranger sees that his friend who was drinking coffee with him in the opening scene has not come to the office over the last 2-3 days. So he wonders what's wrong, and he goes to meet him in his hostel. And he sees that this guy is lying with his bedsheet over his head. So he goes close to him and asks, what happened to you? Why are you lying? And then that guy replies, I was feeling high fever and I wonder if I am becoming a rhino. Is there a horn in my head? He asks. And Beranger dismisses it. Rhinoceros, tenga kola, manga toli. Just get up and come with me. There is nothing, you're totally fine. You have a horn. And he leaves. Then he comes back 2 days later. As they talk, Beranger realizes that he is unable to recognize the language of his friend. He speaks partly like a human, but there is also grumbling noises coming in. And within a few seconds, the horn comes up, the friend becomes a rhino, and he barges towards Beranger. He runs towards Beranger as if to hit him. And Beranger closes the door and runs out. The ending of the play is really interesting. Though it is not befitting to an absurdist play, the ending is really heart-rending. What happens is, as the play draws to the close, with the friend also becoming a rhino, only 2 people are left in the last scene. One is Beranger, the other one is Lady Love, named Daisy. So Daisy and Beranger are on the stage. By now, the rhinos have captured almost all the central places, including the parks, the theaters, the walkways. Every central place, there is a rhino. And the people are getting converted into rhinos. So Beranger and Daisy get involved in a conversation. Perhaps this is one of the best romantic conversations that you would ever come across. Beranger, though an intellectual or a nihilistic sort of a guy, he tries to be a romantic, like Hamlet occasionally does. He tries to tell Daisy that it's okay. Whoever went and became a rhino, it's okay. Let's not bother about them. All that is required for the regeneration of human race is a guy and a girl, which we are. I'm a boy and you're a girl. And if we two cooperate, then we can reproduce the entire humankind and rally them to fight these rhinos. So he's trying to be romantic, to put forward that vision of saving the humankind. And it's a universal truth. A guy and a girl can reproduce. And he tries to say very romantically that, my dear Daisy, you and I would reproduce the entire world. And then Daisy is quite distracted, like the character in the lesson. Yeah. She looks outside and says, there's a rhino in the park. Wow, what beauty. Look at their horns. Aren't they really wonderful? And in the middle of these romantic dialogues, Beranga does get provoked, but he tries to get her. He's like, my dear Daisy, we'll regenerate the world. And she's like, wow, look at the horns. He's like, my Daisy, chakre ponne karale, meri jaan. And he goes on to say reproduction, regeneration of human race, whatever. And Daisy dismisses it by saying, to hell with you and your regeneration of the humankind. What's wrong with the rhinos? Come join them. I'm going to become a rhino. And she walks out. She leaves the stage to become a rhino. All that is left in the stage is a hero, Berengar. And if you download that book from BOK and read that play, there is about a page or 2.5 of a soliloquy sort of a thing, where Berengar says that let whoever want to go, go. Let whoever want to become rhino, become rhino. I am not going to be a rhino. I would live and die a human being. And the closing lines of the play is, I will not capitulate. I am not capitulating. But if you watch that play, ever since Daisy leaves, Berengar speaks for a minute and a half. These last 1.5 pages or so, there is no dialogue whatsoever. Yes, he moves his mouth. There is this action, but you don't get to hear Berengar's voice. Any guesses as to why? You, who are the audience, have become the rhinos. A language is enabled only when two people understand that. A universe where everybody have turned rhinos, there is no place for a monotonous communication. Berengar does not become a rhino. He says he will not capitulate. He is a human being. But in a world full of rhinos, Berengar's language becomes a language of extinct. The primary principle of communication. It's a two-way channel communication. So language ceases to exist. It's a rhino language that would replace that, and that it is not comprehensible to Berengar or vice versa. So inadvertently accusing you all, the audience, as rhinos. That's theater of the absurd for you. And speaking about UNESCO, this was his climactic highlight. Rhinoceros was one of his best, in fact, the best of the plays that I've ever read. And with no specific intentions, go back to 2014 and 19 elections of India. Go back to 2011, 12, 8, 9, whatever. Go back to the story of rhinoceros that I've told you. You would realize the political reality with which it's deeply in sync with. There was a time when people said in Gujarat somebody is ruling and he should never become a ruler. Then there were people who said there is Godhra riots and this, the one who is carrying and the kid being taken out and etc., etc., etc. If this guy becomes something, he'll be dangerous. And one fine day, the media started saying, yeah, this is what India wants. And from 2014, what happened, we are all aware of. So Rhinoceros is not about Romania. Rhinoceros is not about theater of the absurd. It is an intimate reality that can be applied to the political states, the journalistic world. Even you take the case of post-truth in modern era, you would agree with me that it's a play that's of utmost importance. So apart from this, there are plenty of other playwrights like Harold Pinter, for instance, who wrote a play like The Birthday Party. You can go back and read the summary sometime. And there is this wonderful play. I won't again go on detailing it because we have to quickly go to some basic discussions on Beckett. But then there is this wonderful play, one which is modern in the sense it was written recently. Oh my God, where did I? Yeah, it's here. There is this play which is titled Yeah, it was written in the year 1962. I'm sorry. It was written by a playwright called Arthur Kopit, Arthurkopit, in the year 1962. And the play is titled, Oh Dad, Poor Dad, Mama's hung you in the closet and I'm feeling so sad. I repeat, Oh Dad, Poor Dad, Mama means mother, Mama's hung you in the closet and I'm feeling so sad. അച്ഛാ പാവ അച്ഛാ അമ്മ അച്ഛനെ ക്ലോസറ്റിൽ കെട്ടിത്തൂക്കിയേക്കാണ് എനിക്ക് സങ്കടം വരുന്നു पिताजी बेचारे पिताजी अम्मा आपको लटकाई है क्लोसेट में और मुझे दुख आ रही है can't be absurd than this, I suppose. So on that note, I know I have taken quite a lot of time than I even anticipated, but on that positive note, I'd quickly like to switch to waiting for Godot. Before that, I would be sharing the sheet with you. You may fill in the sheet. In the meanwhile, I'd be playing a video which would help you look at Godot critically, and after that, we'll quickly discuss certain important things. All right, hope I'm audible. I'm gonna share the link of the sheet with you. It's there in your chat box. You may fill in the sheet. And in the meanwhile, I'm sharing my screen and I'm going to show you a small video that would brief Waiting for Godot for you and the philosophy of Beckett for you. We'll come back and discuss the play within the limited half an hour that we have.
A shabby man named Estragon sits near a tree at dusk and struggles to remove his boot. He's soon joined by his friend Vladimir, who reminds his anxious companion that they must wait here for someone called Godot. So begins a vexing cycle in which the two debate when Godot will come, why they're waiting, and whether they're even at the right tree. From here, Waiting for Godot only gets stranger. But it's considered a play that changed the face of modern drama. Written by Samuel Beckett between 1949 and 1955, it offers a simple but stirring question. What should the characters do? Don't let's do anything. It's safer. Let's wait and see what he says. Who? Godot. Good idea. Such cryptic dialogue and circular reasoning are key features of the theatre of the absurd, a movement which emerged after the Second World War and found artists struggling to find meaning in devastation. The absurdists deconstructed plot, character, and language to question their meaning and share their profound uncertainty on stage. While this may sound grim, the absurd blends its hopelessness with humor. This is reflected in Beckett's unique approach to genre in Waiting for Godot, which he branded a tragicomedy in 2 acts. Tragically, the characters are locked in an existential conundrum. They wait in vain for an unknown figure to give them a sense of purpose, but their only sense of purpose comes from the act of waiting. While they wait, they sink into boredom, express religious dread, and contemplate suicide. But comically, there is a jagged humor to their predicament, which comes across in their language and movements. Their interactions are filled with bizarre wordplay, repetition, and double entendre, as well as physical clowning, singing, and dancing, and frantically swapping their hats. It's often unclear whether the audience is supposed to laugh or cry, or whether Beckett saw any difference between the two. Born in Dublin, Beckett studied English, French, and Italian before moving to Paris, where he spent most of his life writing theatre, poetry, and prose. While Beckett had a lifelong love of language, he also made space for silence by incorporating gaps, pauses, and moments of emptiness into his work. This was a key feature of his trademark uneven tempo and black humor, which became popular throughout the theater of the absurd. He also cultivated a mysterious persona and refused to confirm or deny any speculations about the meaning of his work. This kept audiences guessing, increasing their fascination with his surreal worlds and enigmatic characters. The lack of any clear meaning makes Godot endlessly open to interpretation. Critics have offered countless readings of the play, resulting in a cycle of ambiguity and speculation that mirrors the plot of the drama itself. It's been read as an allegory of the Cold War, the French Resistance, and Britain's colonization of Ireland. The dynamic of the two protagonists has also sparked intense debate. They've been read as survivors of the apocalypse, an aging couple, two impotent friends, and even as personifications of Freud's ego and id. Famously, Beckett said the only thing he could be sure of was that Vladimir and Estragon were wearing bowler hats. Like the critical speculation and maddening plot, their language often goes in circles as the two bicker and banter, lose their train of thought, and pick up right where they left off. We could start all over again, perhaps. That should be easy. It's the start that's difficult. You can start from anything. Yes, but you have to decide. Beckett reminds us that just like our daily lives, the world on stage doesn't always make sense. It can explore both reality and illusion, the familiar and the strange. And although a tidy narrative still appeals, the best theatre keeps us thinking and waiting. While we have you, why not plunge into an
All right, we'll resume in a minute. If you're still filling those sheets, please be quick. We'll begin in another minute. I can see only close to 70 names there. Today we had a full house, so please make sure you fill in the details. We'll resume shortly. Well, so welcome back, everybody. We are going to resume with the play. Maybe 10 of them have left in the midway. Maybe they felt that we're not discussing Godot, or maybe it was boring for them, or maybe they've had technical issues. Doesn't matter. Let's continue with our discussions. And while I was lecturing over the last, say, 40-45 minutes, as I was doing it from my phone, I couldn't really go through the chat messages that you had sent. So while I was playing this video for you, I was going through the chats. And Jennifer, I think you should really think about moving on to creative thinking or creative writing. Yeah, the soldier must be the lover, and maybe the protagonist was the ghost of the husband who actually was the murderer. Yeah, quite a vision. You should really get into story writing. Okay, let's continue with waiting for Godot. So waiting is one of the most central themes in literature across the ages. I spoke to you about the stream of consciousness novel, The Mist by M.T. Vasudevan Nair. The novel deals with Vimala, the protagonist, waiting for her novel throughout the novel, and he never comes. So waiting and the waiting not attaining fruition is common to most of literatures that we come across. Even Hamlet was waiting for an occasion to murder his uncle. It never appeared until the climax of the play, which was by then quite long. So, nonetheless, waiting for Godot. So, how to approach this play? The plot is simple. There is no plot, nothing happens, nobody comes, nobody goes. That's a subtitle. And the play is divided into two acts, if that was not enough. Yeah, we have two acts. And there are somewhere close to 4 to 5 characters, and they literally do nothing but they involve in illogical conversations. There is no coherence, there is no continuity, there is no meaning. You may look for meaning and you may fail, and sometimes you may be happy that you figured out some design somewhere. But nonetheless, this is one attribute that you would see if you try to read that play. And let me tell you, there are a lot of critics who have derived a lot of meanings from the play because there is no inherent meaning within the play. For example, who is Godot? It's a question that's been asked throughout the ages. There have been so many people who try to have a biblical allusion to the play. There are people who say Godot is God, maybe Christ, which of course Samuel Beckett has dismissed. He says that he didn't mean anybody. It could be Godot could be anyone. Godot never comes. The waiting is for Godot, but Godot never comes. But they wait. And the two tramps who wait, they are old and they are confused and they are insane, or their acts are insane. And insanity is so frivolous that appears to be silly. For example, there is a scene where Diddy tries to commit suicide with a shoelace. I can understand somebody trying to commit suicide with a coil. But here, the character tries to commit suicide, to hang himself using the shoelace. And he fails. He trips. So there are plenty of such sequences which are illogical, hilarious, incoherent, does not make any sense whatsoever. But still within the play, people have tried to identify some structure, some sense or the other. One problem with the TED video is that it shows that tree to be barren. But to be frank, in opening scene it's barren, but in Act 2 it has 2 leaves. A lot of people connect it with regeneration. Often the protagonists are considered to be impotent. Even there are plenty of tall claims and studies on those lines. But irrespective of these critical arguments, there are people who regard Beckett and Godot to be something significant. The reason why I spend a lot of time discussing with you about Ionesco or Harold Pinter or the basic essential plays of absurd theatre is that I consider Samuel Beckett to be an overrated dramatist. Because even though, for example, Ionesco's plays are absurd, if you closely watch that play, there are a lot of things that we can relish in. There are a lot of exciting things in Ionesco's plays. But Beckett, to me, fails in that regard. But even when I say that, Beckett is someone to have experimented deeply with absurdities. He has written a 30-second or 36-second play called Breath. And he has also written a play which lasts for 2 days. So he has experimented widely with plays. He's written several radio plays, for instance. And he has also written theatre of the absurd genre like Endgame or Waiting for Godot and so on. So Beckett is an interesting playwright, but I won't say that his plays are interesting or they make any sense. He deliberately challenges us and our sensibilities. But then there are critics who try to read between the lines and find out something that comforts them. So let me quickly rush through the story that you're familiar with, but I'm just rushing through that so that you could have an idea of what happens, just in case you haven't written your assignment or just in case you haven't read the story yet. And this is a commonplace story from the available sites. Vladimir and Estragon wait at the side of the road near a tree, agreeing that there is nothing to be done. That's how the play begins. If you look at the play, the opening of the play, for instance, where is that? Just a second. Yep, I'm going to share my screen simply to show that play script to you. Yep. So you have Act 1, a country road, a tree, evening. Estragon, sitting on a low mound, is trying to take off his boot. He pulls at it with both hands, panting. He gives up, exhausted, rests, try again, as before. So then enters Vladimir. He says, giving up again, nothing to be done. This is the highlight of the play. Nothing is happening. Nobody comes, nobody goes, nothing happens. And Vladimir replies, I'm beginning to come around to that opinion. All my life I've tried to put it from me, saying, Vladimir, be reasonable. You haven't yet tried everything. And I assumed the struggle. So there you are again. And that goes on to a sort of to a sort of non-commonsensical exchange. It does not make sense at all. There is no time frame, there is no coherence, it does not make sense, and they don't stick to the facts that they said once. They keep changing whatever they said, they keep changing their opinions, they are so emotional, sensitive, and it's quite confusing if you look at it from a rational point of view. And again, look at this. Sometimes I feel it coming all the same. Then I go all queer, strange. How shall I say, relieved and at the same time appalled, appalled. Then there is so much of wordplay, pun from the part of Beckett in the play. And the amount of time nothing is used in the play is quite a lot. Nothingness is the essence of the play. And they go on having exchanges which does not make any sense whatsoever. Sometimes they show love to each other, they seem to be forgetting, they're not sure about the age, they're not sure about the day before, they're not sure is this the tree under which they have to wait Godot or not. They are quite confused in whatever they exchange. And this concept goes on. Sometimes they are philosophical musings, sometimes they are nonsensical, sometimes there is no coherence, congruity, whatever. But one thing that they agree with every time is that they are waiting for Godot. And they are not sure about anything else. Was it here? No, I'm not sure. That we have to wait? I'm not sure. Then there is a guy who comes in towards the end and says that Godot will come tomorrow. So the waiting continues. There's tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. An endless tomorrow becomes the essence of the play as the play proceeds. So when the play begins, these two people say that nothing is to be done. And Estragon tries to struggle with his boots. Vladimir asks Estragon, has ever read the Bible? So a religious allusion coming in. Estragon says all he remembers are some colored maps of the Holy Land. Vladimir tells him about the two thieves crucified along with Jesus. One of the Gospels says that one of the thieves was saved, but Vladimir wonders if this is true. Estragon wants to leave, but Vladimir reminds him that they have to wait here for Godot. They both debate whether they are in the right place and whether it's the right day for Godot to come. In the meanwhile, Estragon falls asleep and Vladimir immediately wakes him up, saying he was lonely without him. Strange, isn't it? He starts to describe his dream, the dream that he had while he fell asleep. But Vladimir angrily stops him and tells him to keep his nightmares to himself. Vladimir wonders what he and Estragon should do. And Estragon says that they should wait. They should continue to wait. While waiting, he suggests that they hang themselves on the tree. The two disagree over who should hang himself first, though, and Vladimir concludes that they should just wait for Godot. Estragon asks what Vladimir asked Godot for, and Vladimir says that he made a vague sort of prayer. Estragon is hungry, and Vladimir offers him a carrot. All he can find in his pockets, though, are turnips. Finally, he finds a carrot and gives it to Estragon. Estragon asks if they are tied to Godot, and Vladimir says that they are. The two are interrupted by a loud scream off stage, and Poso and Lucky enter. And that's perhaps something that for you to note, because at the later point of Act 1, there is Lucky's speech, to which I shall come back very shortly. I'm rushing through the summary so that I can come back to some discussions. So Pozo and Lucky enter. Pozo drives Lucky forward with a whip like a pack animal, with a rope tied around his neck. Lucky is forced to carry Pozo's things, like a master-slave relationship. Estragon asks if this is Godo, but then Poso introduces himself. He jerks the rope that is around Lucky's neck and calls him a pig. Lucky brings him a stool and some food. Poso eats some chicken, and Estragon begs him for the leftover bones. Poso gives him the bone. Vladimir is outraged at Poso's horrible treatment of Lucky and wants to leave. Poso tells him to stay though, in case Godo could show up. Estragon asks why Lucky doesn't put down his bags. Poso says that Lucky has the right to put them down and be comfortable, so he must be carrying them because he wants to. He says that Lucky is trying to impress Poso, so he won't get rid of him because Poso has plenty of slaves. Poso says he plans to sell Lucky at a fair. Lucky begins to cry, and Poso gives Estragon a handkerchief to bring to him. Estragon approaches Lucky, and Lucky kicks him violently in the shin. Poso then begins to cry, saying that he can't bear it. Vladimir scolds Lucky for making his master cry. Poso collects himself and looks for his pipe, which he has misplaced. He makes a speech about night and twilight, then asks if there is anything he can do for Estragon and Vladimir, since they have been nice to him. He offers to make Lucky dance, recite, sing, or think for their entertainment. Lucky dances and his hat falls off. Poso says that Lucky needs his hat to think, so Vladimir places it back on Lucky's head, and Lucky launches into a long, rambling monologue. If you have your exam, if you have short notes, there will be a sure question like comment on Lucky's speech in the play Waiting for Godot. Poso, what the speech is, we'll come back to it later. So Poso prepares to leave and says goodbye to Vladimir and Estragon, but doesn't move. Poso and Lucky eventually leave, and Estragon wants to leave as well. But Vladimir tells him they need to stay and wait for Godo. A boy comes on stage bearing a message from Godo. He says God will not come today, but will come the next day. He tells Vladimir that he works for Godo, minding his goats, and says that Godo is a good master. The boy leaves, and Estragon and Vladimir are ready to leave for the night. They say they are going to leave, but stay still, and the first act ends. The second act begins the next day, in the same location and at the same time. Vladimir enters and sings. Estragon enters and tells Vladimir that he was beaten the previous night for no reason. Vladimir and Estragon embrace, happy to see each other again, and Estragon asks what they should do. Vladimir tells him they should wait for Godo. Vladimir mentions Pozo and Lucky, and Estragon doesn't remember who these people are. He also doesn't recognize the place where they are waiting from the day before. Vladimir says that he and Estragon picked grapes for the same man a long time ago in the Macan country, but Estragon doesn't remember this either. After a long silence, Vladimir asks Estragon to talk about anything to fill the silence. But the two struggle to find something to talk about. Vladimir asks if Estragon really doesn't remember Lucky and Posu. Estragon remembers someone kicking him and remembers the chicken bones he got from Pozu. Vladimir offers Estragon a radish or a turnip because he has no carrots. Estragon falls asleep but then wakes up startled. He begins to tell Vladimir about his dream, but he interrupts him and tells him not to describe the dream. You can see that the same scenes are being repeated in Act 2 too. Estragon wants to leave, but Vladimir reminds him that they have to stay and wait for Godo. Vladimir notices Lucky's hat lying on the ground and tries it on. He and Estragon trade their hats and Lucky's hat back and forth, trying different ones on. Vladimir wants to play at Pozo and Lucky, and he and Estragon pretend to be the two characters. Estragon leaves the stage for a moment and then returns and says that they are coming. He and Vladimir hold lookouts at either end of the stage. After insulting each other, they make up an embrace. Pozo and Lucky enter, or to be specific, re-enter. Now, Poso has gone blind, following closely behind Lucky. Lucky stops when he sees Vladimir and Estragon, and Poso bumps into them. They both fall to the ground, and Poso cannot get up. Vladimir and Estragon consider trying to get something out of Poso for helping him up. Poso cries out for help and offers money in return for any assistance. Vladimir decides to help Poso up, but falls over himself in the process. Estragon tries to help Vladimir up, but falls down in the process. None of the characters are able to get up for a while, but Estragon suddenly suggests that he and Vladimir try to stand up, and they are able to get up easily. Estragon again wants to leave, but Vladimir tells him to keep waiting. He suggests they help Poso to get up in the meantime. They stand Poso up, and he asks who they are, not remembering either of them from the previous day. He asks what time it is, and Estragon thinks it's morning, while Vladimir is sure that it's evening. Vladimir asks when Poso went blind, and Poso says that the blind have no notion of time. He asks Estragon to check on Lucky. Estragon goes over to Lucky and kicks him repeatedly. Poso shouts, "Up, pig!" and yanks on Lucky's rope. The two leave the stage as Estragon falls asleep. Vladimir wakes Estragon, saying he was lonely. Just like the day before, a boy enters with a message from Godo that he'll not come this day, but will certainly come the next. Vladimir asks the boy what Godo does, and the boy says Godo does nothing. Vladimir asks the boy to tell Godo that he saw Vladimir. The boy leaves. Estragon wants to go far away, but Vladimir says they can't go far, as they have to come back here tomorrow and wait for Godo. Estragon suggests they hang themselves on the tree using his belt, but when they test the belt's strength by pulling on either end, it breaks. Vladimir and Estragon prepare to leave for the night. They say they are going to leave, but neither moves. And the second act and the play thereby comes to an end. And this is a plot. And between this plot, you can see that the plot is cyclical. Act 2 is in a way a repetition of Act 1. Of course, there are a few changes that we need to mind. For instance, that Poso has gone blind. In the Act 1, Poso was the master and Lucky was a slave. Here, Lucky shows way to Poso. In both the plays, Godo does not come. Vladimir feels alone when Estragon sleeps. Estragon has nightmares. All these things keep repeating. Critics ponder over this to have their own perspectives, to which you may go back and refer to your study materials. And because of the lack of time, I'd like to limit my discussion to one central moment. I'm sure absurdity is evident to you now. So I'm not going on to elaborate that once again. You can go back and see how this fares. And if possible, go back and read Martin Eslin's introduction, The Theatre of the Absurdity of the Absurd, as well. I'll show you that article a little while later. For the time being, we'll stick to one single aspect due to the lack of time, and that is Lucky's speech. I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to share Lucky's speech. We may not end at 7:30, maybe it will be 7:40 by the time we wind up. Apologies for that. But I'm going to share a small video of Lucky's speech. We'll watch that, come back, discuss that, and wind up.
On the other hand, with regard to... Stop! Back! Stop! Think! Given the existence as uttered forth in the public works of Puncher and Watman of a personal God, qua, 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 with white beard, qua, 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 outside time, without extension, who from the heights of divine apathia divine Athambia, divine Aphasia, loves us dearly, with some exceptions, for reasons unknown, but time will tell. And suffers like the divine Miranda with those who, for reasons unknown, but time will tell, are plunged in torment, plunged in fire, whose fire flames, if that continues, and who can doubt it, will fire the firmament, that is to say, blast hell to heaven. So blue, still, and calm, so calm with a calm which, even though intermittent, is better than nothing, but not so fast. And considering what is more, that as a result of the labors left unfinished, crowned by the Academy of Anthropometry of Essay and Posse of Testu and Cunard, it is established beyond all doubt, all other doubt than that which clings to the labors of men, that as a result of the labors unfinished of Testu and Cunard, it is established as hereinafter, but not so fast, for reasons unknown, that as a result of the public works of Puncher and Watman, it is established beyond all doubt that in view of the labors of Fartov and Belcher, left unfinished for reasons unknown, of Testu and Cunard, left unfinished, it is established what many deny, that man in Posse of Testu and Cunard, that man in Essay, that man in Short, that man in Brief, in spite of the strides of alimentation and defecation, is seen to waste and pine. Waste and pine, and concurrently, simultaneously, what is more, for reasons unknown, in spite of the strides of physical culture, the practice of sports such as tennis, football, running, cycling, swimming, flying, floating, riding, gliding, conating, camogie, skating, tennis of all kinds, dying, flying, sports of all sorts, autumn, summer, winter tennis of all kinds, hockey of all sorts, penicillin and succedanea, in a word, I resume, and concurrently, simultaneously, for reasons unknown, to shrink and dwindle. In spite of the tennis, I resume flying, gliding, golf over 9 and 18 holes, tennis of all sorts, in a word, for reasons unknown in Peckham, Fulham, Clapham, namely concurrently, simultaneously, what is more for reasons unknown, but time will tell, to shrink and dwindle. I resume Fulham, Clapham, in a word, the dead loss per capita since the death of Bishop Berkeley being to the tune of 1 inch 4 ounce per capita, approximately, by and large, more or less, to the nearest decimal, good measure, round figure, stark naked in the stocking street in Connemara, in a word, for reasons unknown, no matter what matter, the facts are there. And considering what is more, much more grave, that in the light of the labours lost of Steinweg and Petermann, it appears what is more, much more grave, that in the light of the labours lost of Steinweg and Petermann, that in the plains, in the mountains, by the seas, by the rivers running water, running fire, the air is the same, and then the earth, namely the air, and then the earth, and the great cold, the great dark, the air and the earth, abode of stones, and the great cold, alas, alas, in the year of the Lord 600 and something, the air, the earth, the sea, the earth, abode of stones, and the great cold, the great deeps on sea, on land, and in the air. I resume, for reasons unknown, in spite of the tennis, the facts are there, but time will tell. I resume, alas, alas, on, in short and fine, on, the boat of stones, who can doubt it? I resume, but not so fast. I resume, the sculpture shrink and waste, and concurrently, simultaneously, what is more for reasons unknown, in spite of the tennis, on, the beard, the flames, the tears, the stones, so blue, so calm, alas, alas, on, the skull, the skull, the skull, the skull in Connemara, in spite of the tennis, the labours abandoned, left unfinished, graver still, a boat of stones, in a word, I resume, alas, alas, abandoned, unfinished, the skull in Connemara, in spite of the tennis, the skull, alas, the stones, Cunard, tennis, the stones, Cunard, unfinished.
Avenged! Give me that! There's an end to his thinking.
Well, will he be able to orientate himself?
I'll orientate him. Up, pig!
Perhaps he's dead. You'll kill him.
Up, scum! Help me.
How?
All right. Needless to say, a seemingly nonsensical monologue, a speech in gibberish that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and something that you would have found to be bizarre. I herewith share the link. Of course, it's there in the text. If you go to the play, you would see that. But then I share here with the play a link of that speech with you if you want to go back to. But then there are critics who have tried to read through this nonsensical text and tried to find some religious meanings to lucky speech. So before we wind up today, I'd like to share my screen with you and quickly tell you about the interpretation. So Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot contains quite a few provocative biblical allusions, and one of that is lucky speech near the end of Act 1. I'm just enlarging this just in case you want to see this clear. Okay. So if you look by selecting certain phrases and eliminating others, I have sent the full text to you in the chat box. So if you eliminate a few and read selectively, read between the lines, then they say, given the existence of a personal God with white beard, who from the heights loves us dearly, with some exceptions for reasons unknown, but time will tell and suffers with those who are plagued in torment. It is established beyond all doubt that man is short, wastes and pines, abandoned, unfinished. So there are critics who have identified certain design within the script, and they compare it with the speech in the book of Job, and they try to draw parallels between lucky speech and belief in Christ and biblical allusions to the play. Though Beckett has more often than not denied the biblical allusions in the play. And that's another supreme thing that's often discussed with the play. But for as IGNOR learners, you may not be asked a question like unveil the religious perception in the play. You may simply have a question like assess the play as an absurd play, or assess the characters in the play, or maybe something like justify the title Waiting for Godot, etc. You won't have really political things for your exams. That's how IGNOR generally functions. And before we call it a day, I'd like to share a few links with you. The primary link is the movie. There are plenty of movies made on Waiting for Godot. Not all are available in the web. I have a few in my hard disk, but I can't share it. But then this is one available in YouTube. The scene was shown from this clip. So you can go watch that movie if and when you have time. I would also like to share the link of a short film made on Samuel Beckett's own another absurd play, Krapp's Last Tape. That's another play by Beckett that I forgot to mention in the meanwhile. So a short film which is an adaptation of Krapp's Last Tape in Malayalam though, but I think there are subtitles probably. So if you want to go have a look at it, Krappum Kuruppum, in which the late Dr. V.C. Harris also played a crucial role. You may go back and have a look at that if you want to. Then, well, Lucky Speech is there in the movie already, but still if you want to have personal 5-minute viewing, I'm sharing that with you. The next link I'm going to share is for those who know Hindi. To me, this is one of the best available adaptations of Waiting for Godot in the web. It is much more better because it's Desi. So you have a Hindi version of Waiting for Godot, which I've shared in the chat box. And I'm also sharing a lecture, again a 30-minute lecture by Dr. V. Hariharan. You all know him already as the head of the Institute of English, Trivandrum. So that's also done. And regarding the books that I was speaking about, The Theatre of the Absurd is one book that you need to take care of. And the lady from Bangalore, you keep asking me about the books that you need to bank on. And I often say that go back to, who was it? Yeah, M.H. Abraham's Glossary of Literary Terms. I would still say that. And I'm going to share my link with you just to show this. It's available in BOK. This is the latest edition of the glossary. Apart from Abrams, Jeffrey Galthapham has also edited it. And this is the 10th edition. This is available in BOK for free. If you want to have a look at that, you may go back and download this book. And I would also be happy if you can find some time to go read this essay, Introduction, the Absurdity of the Absurd. This is from Harold Bloom's Modern Critical Interpretations of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. It's available in BOK too. Page 34, you have Martin Lestlin's introduction. And I'd like to discuss that in brief as well before we wind up. This is the cover page, just in case you want to make sure while downloading. Harold Bloom's critical interpretations. There are plenty of essays regarding this work by people like, say, Walter Asmus, Martin Esslin, Catherine Bachman, Norman Berlin, and so on and on and on. There is even a feministic interpretation of the play, if you want to read it. And page 34 is about the Godot experiment that Martin Esslin speaks about. And even though we speak about this play as absurd, meaningless, in this essay, Martin Esslin draws our attention to a case scenario where this play was performed to a selected audience once. And that selected audience were a group of jail inhabitants, culprits, prisoners. And Martin Esslin says that they found this play to be a portrayal of their real day-to-day life. Imprisoned, future is bleak for them. Memory is waning. And they wait for something, maybe the day when they would see the clear light of the day. So Martin Esslin says that this play was a success among that play, in that workshop for the prisoners in the year 1957. So you can read the theater experiment in detail if you want to in Bloom's critical editions. And we have exceeded time by 5 minutes. It's not that it matters, but then the count has come down to 70 by 100 from 100, which is probably an indicator that the session has started to become a bore, perhaps. So today, don't worry that I'm cutting the Q&A session down, because tomorrow we have nothing else than speak. Even though I'll talk to you briefly about how to write annotation and essay, we'll still have close to, say, at least 30 minutes to discuss, if you want to, that is. So I urge you to come back tomorrow writing your annotations, at least one of them, yeah, so that we can discuss how to write an annotation and also work on an essay if you can. If not, I'll still give you an idea on how to write an essay, and we'll discuss how to prepare for your examinations. And I'll try to brief kitchen sink drama because so many of you have requested, and we'll hopefully wind up our sessions tomorrow. We'll have plenty of time for questions, so if you have any queries regarding today's session, we can have that tomorrow. And as I keep telling you, the recordings is with the regional center. You can contact them. From what I understand, they'll upload that in the website soon. And I really hope that they don't upload the session that I had yesterday. It would really look terrible. But otherwise, yeah, jokes apart, I hope they would upload it soon. And it'll be available in the public domain for you to use. So on that positive note, if it's okay with you, we'll call it a day, and we'll come back tomorrow and have a clarion call, farewell session. We'll say cheese, we'll say tata bye-bye, maybe we'll click some selfies, even online it's possible. We'll click some group fees, and we'll say bye-bye until we meet next time in your second year. I hope that'll do. So on that positive note, good night everyone. See you tomorrow with your doubts. And thank you so much for being here on